Cooking is the biggest, most common indoor source. So if you don't cook, you don't have this as a source, but everyone else that cooks does have it as a source. And it became so clear that it was the dominant indoor source that we developed some good resources to address it. So check out the ROCIS guidance document and webpage on kitchen range hoods, the issue brief. And this isn't limited to just a few how to install an effective kitchen range hood. It's also dealing with how to make a kitchen range hood that you might have more effective, and also some things you can do if you don't have a kitchen range hood. So it's really addressing the whole idea of how to reduce cooking emissions. And then we did the webinar. This webinar was about a year ago, a little over a year ago. Keep a lid on it, and just really, really solid session on reducing cooking pollution in homes. So the link to that, and you can listen to the webinar, is on our website. And there's the link.
Okay, so we just have some more considerations here. A couple of them we've already touched on, but range hood, this is a ducted range hood, as you can see from that photo. We want ones that are going to be extracting that polluted cook air and extracting it to an outdoor location, either through the roof or the wall or something. Cooking style, similar to the question about sauteing, you can saute, but if you saute with a lid on, regardless of what your cooking surface is or your heating element, you're going to reduce that. Frying or steaming or something, baking it inside the confines of an oven is going to also contain particles more. So that's something else to consider. Yeah, I mentioned use of lids kind of mixed in with that one.
Lids also allow you to cook at a lower temperature.
Yeah, and then in terms of temperature, high and fast versus low and slow, you can get to the same point if you're not in a rush and reduce the particles in between. Various types of oils or butters, different fats have different properties to them in terms of particles. And then additives to the cooking fat as well, like salt and pepper. Basically, if you add salt and pepper into your cooking fat whilst it is heating up in a pan or pot, greatly reduces the amount of particle emissions that are put off. And there's some other additives like turmeric, which can also do a decent job. It's not quite as effective as salt and pepper, though. And the thought with this is that it's changing the surface tension of the cooking fat. So the way that the particles kind of radicalize, volatilize down against the hot surface of the pan is going to be different. Kind of contains them more opposed to shooting them off into the atmosphere. So that's what that's about. And then we have this chart here that touches on the cooking oil, cooking fats. You're going to be doing high temperature cooking, like searing or, grilling. This is within the confines of indoors. So if you have a griddle or something, you want to use something like avocado oil. Some of these other oils are good, but avocado oil you can see is the highest flash smoke point there. It's a 520 degrees Fahrenheit. So that can take quite a bit of temperature on a pan or a griddle or something before it starts to emit, break down and volatilize and create particles that you're going to be exposed to. Some of the other ones like ghee, clarified butter is pretty good and pretty cheap. Avocado oil can be kind of expensive, but it's getting cheaper and cheaper. Things like olive oil are okay, but you should really only be doing that for a saute, lower temperature cooking. Same goes for butter. All that stuff in the 350 degree range is probably better suited for baking than it would be cooking. And it just mentions that you really shouldn't be cooking with toasted oils and some seed oils. They have low smoke points, and they also have a slew of other particles that come off of them. Like I know grapeseed oil, for example, has a high amount of other pollutants like PAHs.
I don't know how many of the people on this call like bacon. I like bacon. I don't cook it very much, but bacon's sort of the classic way to get your dilose to spike 50,000 or more. What's going on with bacon is you're basically, it's splattering the fat all over the sides of the pan and then charring and also getting the fat outside the pan. So that's part of the real culprit with bacon. But Emily, why don't you describe a couple things you do instead of frying bacon?
I do it in like a cake pan. a glass cake pan, and I just lay the bacon out side by side. I smush it together quite a bit because bacon shrinks a ton, so I can usually get a normal package of bacon in a normal 9 by 13 pan, and I bake it at like 375 for 10 to 12 minutes. And it comes out perfectly flat. Sometimes I flip it once if I feel like it, but it doesn't make a mess and it doesn't spike the dylos too much. And it's much easier to cook that way. Other people have cooked it in the microwave on some of those hanging things or flat, and someone that Linda observed even did it in a saucepan. They did sort of 2 or 3 one way and then 2 or 3 another way over the top of it until they used up all the bacon, and somehow, I haven't experimented with that, but somehow it all cooked and with a lid on and was not nearly as messy as the traditional method.
I tried that one time and I wasn't quite sure how to pour the fat off. I mean, obviously you have to keep the fat off or you end up with not very crispy bacon, but so I hadn't mastered that yet. I observed that it worked well though, but it takes a little practice.
Yeah, in the stove method, I pull it off onto paper towels and then let it cool down and pour the fat off. The oven
So
method.
anyone have comments about what they've discovered, either what works well or what doesn't?
I always cook my bacon on jelly roll pans on parchment paper in the oven. So I've always done that. So I think that's good that I have that habit.
And you agree that gets you the best bacon,
Yes,
right?
it's easy. It's best bacon, the least amount of mess, and now we don't have the particles in the air. So yeah, but I use photo parchment so I can. It's an easy cleanup.
I guess I had a question. When you do it in the oven, do the particles just end up inside the oven, or what? I mean, they still are formed when it cooks, or not? What happens with the particles?
My hypothesis would be that it doesn't splatter as much because it's an even temperature all around rather than it just being hot on the bottom. So I suspect there are less particles total, but that they're confined and maybe settle out a little instead of it being constantly put in the air like if it were on a stovetop. But I am no expert.
And I know that it's the splatter that gets you because when you've got it in a pan on the stovetop, the splatter is what turns from grease or fat to black char, and that's what is producing particles like crazy.
Maybe you said this, but do you put a lid on the pan when you put it in the oven or not?
I do not.
Okay.
Yep. So this is a plot of particle size, and the way that this is basically explained is on the left side you have particle numbers, and that's in a cubic centimeter. So that's the volume in which the particles are counted in. And then down below you have the diameter of the particle, starting at 0 and then going upwards. So the blue line there, the vertical one that has an arrow on the top of it pointing left, that is basically where your dylos starts to see things. Your dylos can't see anything smaller than that particle. Particle diameter. So all of this stuff that is spiking up to the left, this is various things that are cooked. Okay, so each line is its own type of thing or activity or cooking, and it represents how high they can get, how much there is, etc. So there's oven cleaning, wok, stir frying, bacon cooking, tortilla frying, French fries, broiling fish, lasagna. Only a couple of these are contained in an oven. Now, in oven cleaning, I'm kind of ignoring, setting aside as its own thing. But like lasagna, for example, that's an oven dish. Broiling fish, that's an oven dish. But all the rest of the stuff is pretty much cooked out in the open. So lasagna number 7, that's pretty down there because it's cooked in an oven, and also to an extent probably the composition of the type of food that's being made, noodles and sauce and stuff. But all these other things are basically volatilizing right up into the air that you're standing over the stove. So you're getting exposed to all of these different types of particles and these different types of activities, and your dylos is barely even picking up on it. So there's a whole bunch of exposure you're facing that, even though it may not be visible in the dylos, it's still happening. So this kind of is reinforcing that idea that you should try to adjust, behaviorally adjust your cooking practices, even when you think that maybe it's okay because the dilose, isn't spiking yet or something. But this is pretty severe stuff. And then for oven cleaning, like I said, it's kind of set aside its own thing. It's not really cooking per se. You really shouldn't even be inside when the oven is, if you're doing a self-clean type of thing in the oven, because of how much is this mucked up stuff on the side of it that is being basically charred off and spewed out into the air. Range hood can only help so much with this. So if you're going to clean your oven, step out on the patio while you do it. I wouldn't say leave the house because it might burn down, but yeah, step outside, turn on a bathroom exhaust fan if it's in the wintertime or something, turn on your range hood, crack a window, that type of thing. Try to stay away from closed doors for the kitchen, maybe if you have them. You can also not do oven cleaning and clean the oven still without using the clean function by putting either white vinegar in the bottom, the basin of the oven, or in like a Pyrex, or a bread pan or something like that in the oven, and just putting it on like the low broil function. So like, 450-ish. You can also do it with just water as well. But yeah, I would
Works
say,
great in the microwave as well.
yeah,
Vinegar
go
is
ahead
great.
with that. Good point.
Just exactly the same. Just a little bit of vinegar in a dish in the microwave for like 3 minutes, and then all the stuff has sort of the vinegar has mostly aerosolized. Is that the right word? It's vaporized. It's liquid all around inside the microwave, and you can just wipe it out basically. Super easy to clean.
You can use lemon juice too.
That makes sense. Yep.
Uh-huh.
I see your question. Do we have any data on air fryers and Instapots?
Yeah,
I
we
think we've
keep
got.
we keep talking about this. We don't have much. I know that somebody last cohort anecdotally mentioned, I didn't follow up on their notes, but they mentioned that when the Instant Pot did its release, it spiked the dilose really, really high.
But a lot does seem like as long as you've got a cover on it, I mean, when you consider that those things allow you to, they perform cooking more efficiently, so you'd think that your overall emissions would be reduced. I don't know if when instead of releasing it, if you could just let it cool down longer. I've not used those devices, so I'm a neophyte in that regard.
Yeah, there's
But
two styles, and it just depends on the recipe kind of. One is like a quick release, and you pop the top and it goes, psst, and all the steam shoots out. And then the other is like a slow release. It's more gradual.
Mhm.
But I think whoever it was last cohort, I forget who it was, said that they saw spikes on both of them. And just anecdotally, having used an air fryer, it's pretty much just a convection oven basically, and it's sucking air from the outside and just heating it and putting it through the oven, which then escapes to the outside as well. So I can actually test it in 2 weeks, but I wouldn't suspect that it's free from particles really.
Certainly, we imagine things like the Joe Foreman, something Foreman grill. If you're grilling inside your house, that's going to be a lot of particles.
A whole lot. Yep, that's bad news. So one of the things that this graph brings out, and this is just talking about the particles from cooking these different things, but actually you also get particle reduction anytime you've got a red hot surface. So if you've got a toaster oven and it's, the element's hot red, or if you've got electric resistance cooktop and it's on high, so it's red hot, those things will produce a whole lot of very, very small particles called nanoparticles. So I've not been able to see a whole lot of conclusive health data, but just the fact that they're nanoparticles and they're carrying other stuff with them was enough to cause me to not give up toast and be a lot more careful about cooking at low temperatures and not get red hot surfaces. So that's something to be aware of too. Any other questions about the cooking related stuff?
I wanted to share that. So we've had a number of experiences cooking pasta, on a gas stove top, and we don't really see anything on the dilose particularly. We've seen some really big effects from sautéing things, but at least, just kind of looking at the monitors, don't see anything in particular, just from having the gas flame on or boiling the pasta. So I don't know if that's consistent with other people and what they see or not.
And a lot of what happens when you cook with gas is not going to be necessarily particles. You're going to get other pollutants that are product of combustion. So that's an added concern and just an example that our equipment's not going to show you everything.
And so in that case, I mean, I think referring to your earlier comments, we'd probably see a lot of the nanoparticles that don't show up on the Dylos. I guess that's what you're saying in part.
The nanoparticles tend to be with electric. You don't necessarily get the nanoparticles from a gas flame. You get all kinds of other stuff, NOx, and,
Okay.
those things. So on to Sam.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about induction cooktops. And so an induction cooktop tricks the pot into creating its own heat. And so what you'll have is a hot pot with a relatively cool surface. And if you look online, you can find lots of images like this where there's a frying pan that's cut in half on the cooking surface of an induction cooktop, and the portion of the food that's in the frying pan is either cooking or melting, but the portion that's sitting directly on the cooktop is not. Well, how is that possible? The induction cooktop has these two coiled induction elements located just beneath the glass cooktop surface. And when electricity flows into the coils, it creates a magnetic field, which is, of course, not inherently hot. But when magnetic cookware is placed on this magnetic field, electrical eddy currents form in the material of the pot. And those are also not in themselves inherently hot, but they are flowing against the electrical resistivity of the pot's material. And the pot's resistance to the rapidly changing magnetic fields produces an internal friction that in turn produces heat. And as a result, the pot heats itself up. Okay, and I have a quick little demo here. So what I have here sitting on the counter is the portable induction cooktop. It's a 2-burner unit that belongs to ROCIS, and this is something that anyone can request to borrow if you would like to try it out. And as you can see, it is quite portable. It's weighs maybe 12 pounds or so. And I have this side by side with our gas stove in our home. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to do a side-by-side boiling water demonstration. But first, just a little more about the cooktop. So these two burners each have their identical independent panels. And they're, so you can see I can turn it on, and I can choose on the menu the power level, but it's throwing an error because it realizes that there's no magnetic cookware on this. And so in this case, these are stainless steel pots. And so there's a menu option to select the temperature based on a scale from 1 to 10, or you can actually select it in degrees Fahrenheit. There's a boil function. There's a function to just keep it warm. There's a timer and a lock function as well. So I'll go ahead and put the pan on this time. And this time it does allow me to select the power level. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with the stove. Okay, and so they're both on high. And I'm going to put a cup of water into each. And I also have a heat thermometer here so we can compare
the temperature. So just initially, I can already see tiny bubbles on the bottom of the induction pot. So this is saying it's currently at about 155 degrees Fahrenheit. And the gas stove is catching up there. It's about 126. And they are both at the highest. I don't know if you can see the flames of the gas stove pot, but they're both on the highest. Okay, so this is actually already boiling. Don't know if you can, how well you can see that. So yeah, so the induction unit is already boiling over 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and the gas stove is heading up to 160. So another thing that you can, that hopefully you can see here with the induction unit is how responsive it is. So I'm going to quickly turn the power setting down to 1, and it's already stopped boiling. And the one on the gas stove, it's boiling in a corner there. So it's over 200 now. And the other thing that I can show you with the induction cooktop is that even though this water was boiling just a few minutes ago, it's very hot. I can still touch it, right, even in the center there where the pot was, but right beside where the pot is, it's just barely warm. Kind of consistent with those images that we showed you. I'm going to turn this off. Does anybody want to add anything about your insights from your induction cooking?
Looks pretty much like what you're showing us. It's just fast and really, really fantastic.
Yeah, it's so fast. I definitely made my air quality much worse initially because I kept burning things because I had not yet adjusted to how quickly everything heated up. But it makes cooking a joy.
We have induction heating or stovetop too. So yeah, it's really great. Very expensive though, I'll have to say that, but it was worth it.
Well, you got to buy the right cookware to use with it too. It doesn't come cheap either, but it's worth it.
Right. Fortunately, we had a lot of cast iron cookware and that all works. So that was nice.
We have several portable induction units, so if any of you that don't already have induction want to borrow, we also have pots that you can borrow with them.
Well, I think one of the other really nice things is the response time is really quick. It's like gas. It's not like an electric stove, which you have to wait for it to heat up and wait for it to cool down. You just turn it up and it gets hot. You turn it down and it's cool. So that's nice.
Yeah, the speed at which it cooks food is amazing. You have to kind of retrain yourself. I was very skeptical because I used to have a restaurant, so I was a gas cooker person. So I really had to reinvent like the times I cook my stuff because it cooks so incredibly fast. And you can tell it doesn't have as much fumes or what.
Yeah, there's no hot air rising on the sides of the pot.
Yeah, so it's cleaner too, a cleaner way of cooking.
And speaking of the, not having the hot air rising from the cooking surface, so just to reiterate some of the pluses that you just mentioned. So induction stovetops don't have a gas burner. They don't have the red hot burner surface that you would find with an electric cooktop. And as you mentioned, they have very efficient control of cooking temperature.
We find that we get the big spikes when we saute something. So if you use this induction method and you sauteed something, wouldn't that still put a lot of particles in the air?
Yes, but with the red hot burning surface of an electric stove and with a gas burner, you also have the additional worry of the burning surface itself generating very small particles, so that whatever comes in contact with that burning surface will end up producing particles.